Okay, this is Eric, and I'm here with my grandma, Virginia Adair.
Whew.
That's my grandma. So, Grandma, what year were you born?
1934.
And that was, what, like 4 years into the Great Depression? When did that officially start?
I don't know, but we were in the Depression.
Where did you
for
live?
sure. Between Baron and Westville on a country road up in the country where Frank lives now.
And what did your parents do?
My parents were farmers. Dad was a farmer, and Mom was a housewife and also helped with the farm.
What did you guys raise on the farm?
We raised mostly cattle, and we had some sheep. We had horses, lots of chickens, hogs.
Yeah, so mostly animals.
Right.
Did you know that the Great Depression was a thing? Like, did your parents talk about it, or did you just think that's the way things
No,
were?
I just thought that was the natural way for everybody.
Yeah.
And I don't think they called it the Depression
Yeah.
at that time. It was just hard. People were poor,
Yeah.
and it was hard to have any money. And my dad worked on the farm. He was a farm manager for a doctor who lived in Siloam that owned the farm. And Dad was the farm manager. He made $1 a day.
Wow.
But we raised all the food that we needed.
Yeah.
And when Mom bought groceries, it was just flour, sugar, salt.
Made everything from scratch.
Yeah, right. She made all of our clothes, and they raised all of our food, so we didn't need much of anything.
When did you go to school around there?
I went to school when I was 5 and a half. Mom sent me to school, and I always wondered why she got rid of me so early. But I started school at Westville in the first grade, rode the school bus.
Was it a one-room school or?
Oh, no, it
No?
was a big school.
Yeah.
They had a big, huge stone building.
Yeah.
And they had first through 8th grades in that building, and then the high school was close by.
So, at what point did you leave this area?
I left, let me think. My dad and Mom took jobs over at Pryor during the war, and it was probably 1942, 1943, and we moved to Pryor, and they worked in what was called a ammunition factory over there. And I went to school at Pryor for a couple of years that we lived there. And then we moved back to Summers, Arkansas, and I went to school at Summers for a couple of years, probably in the 5th and 6th grade. And then we moved to Baron, and I went to school at Baron through the 7th and 8th grade, and then back to Westville for my high school years.
And then at some point you moved to Tulsa, right?
Yeah, I went to Tulsa after I graduated high school to go to business school.
What year was that?
That was in 1951.
Do you remember much about World War II being out here? Did it affect you much out here?
Yes, very much. I didn't know there was such a place called Japan until Pearl Harbor was bombed. And then I heard all the grown-ups talking about it, and I thought, Japan. I never heard of that before. There's other places. And then I learned about Germany. And it was talked about so much because all of my uncles were in the war from both sides, Mom's brothers and Dad's brothers. And we couldn't buy things because things were rationed.
Yeah.
And you had to have ration stamps in order to buy sugar, shoes, gasoline. A lot of things were rationed. And we went to the ration board and made application.
Would you get a glass of water?
Made application for the rations, and it was dependent upon the size of your family, how many stamps you got.
Wow.
And so because of that, it was always a big topic. Did anybody have enough stamps to go buy a pair of shoes or whatever? And you couldn't buy cooking. Lots of people cooked with lard that they rendered at home, but when you ran out of that and you had to buy shortening.
Yeah.
You had to buy shortening. And then when you couldn't buy that, people were buying mineral oil and cooking, frying.
I heard of that.
Frying.
And that was really not good for you.
I don't know, but my mom used it at some times. She wasn't a big user of it, but I do know that people used it. And then there was also a move on to collect scrap metal for the war effort. And on the farm, we kids would pick up all the scrap metal that we could find, and we'd stack it up.
Set it over there. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. We would stack it up in one spot, at about once a month. A truck would come through the countryside and collect all the scrap metal. And I think we donated it. I don't think there was any profit in it for us. I think it was just a donation to the war effort.
Yeah.
And then my grandmother walked to Baron, and there was a sewing group of women that met there, and they made comforts to send to the soldiers overseas, like blankets and things. And so because of that, everybody was involved in the war effort.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you had the Vietnam War where there was so many problems connected with that, but everyone was united to the war effort in World War II.
Do you remember ever going to, I've seen in old movies where people would go to like the local movie theater to watch war updates, like news update footage?
Yeah, and you get the newsreel, it was called, and that's where you got a lot of your war news.
That's so
fascinating. If
fascinating.
you didn't have a newspaper or radio, there was no television then. And so, the newsreel would have shots of what was going on overseas in the war. Yeah, I remember that very well. And it was easy to get to the movie theater in Westville. And it was probably 10 cents to get into the movie. And you always had the newsreel and some kind of maybe a little comedy scene that lasted 5 minutes or so, and then you got the movie, whatever it was.
Did you go to the movies a lot when you were that age?
Quite a bit, considering that we lived probably 5 miles out in the country. And usually it was Saturday afternoon that we got to go to the movie because Dad would drive a wagon to town and take us kids. So we spent all Saturday afternoon in town, and they would give us enough money to go to the movies, get us out of their hair, I guess.
Do you remember any movies or movie stars you really liked back then?
The first movie star I was ever aware of, her name was Deanna Durbin. And I cut a picture of her out of a magazine and kept it in my room with my stuff. And I wasn't too aware of anybody else, but Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and those old cowboy movies.
Cowboys, yeah.
Because there was a lot of those movies showing at Westville.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah.
What age were you when you moved to Tulsa to go to business school?
I was 17. And I had a job waiting for me, a part-time job, in a theater selling tickets, and I wasn't 18 yet.
You know, I had that job in high school, too.
Really?
I sold movie tickets at a theater, yeah.
Yeah. So when I filled out my application and they saw I was only 17, they told me to change my birth date and make myself 18. So I did. And I worked there all the time I went to business school.
Yeah. So go ahead and take a drink of water. I got more questions. So you've told me that when you were living in Tulsa, you lived in a home with a bunch of other girls?
3 other girls. There was 4 of us. Well, we lived the first month or so in the school, at the school,
Mm-hmm.
up on the third floor, but we had no way to cook our food or anything, no cooking facilities. So we lasted there about a month or two, having to eat all of our meals out. So the four of us got together, we rented an apartment. And it's located where the courthouse is, I think 4th and Denver and
Downtown
Tulsa.
Tulsa, yeah.
So that's where our apartment was. And
Wow.
it was a 2-story house. And it had apartments, a couple downstairs and a couple upstairs. So we could go in through the front and go up the stairs to our apartment, or we could take the outside stairway right up to our apartment. And the first weekend, all those 3 girls were gone, and they left me there by myself that weekend, and it was cold. And we had a little short clothesline out on this little landing where these stairs came up the outside of the building. So during the night, I start hearing this thump, 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 and I think somebody's coming up the stairs and they're going to get me. And I finally got enough courage to look out, and there was something hanging on that little clothesline, and it was frozen. And the wind was blowing it up to the house, and that's the thump, thump, thump that I kept hearing.
What do you remember about Tulsa in the 50s, especially being right downtown like that?
It was a nice little town, and it was so easy to get around in. And there was a good bus system. You could ride the bus, or you could even call a cab if you were in a hurry. And lots of times when I rode the Trailway bus back to Westville to come home for a weekend, I would call a cab and have it take me to the bus station. And so it was real easy to get around. And the town was small, and 31st and Harvard was the very first shopping center outside of town, and that was way out in the country. It was quite a thing to
That's still there, that shopping center.
that people had built this shopping center out in the country at 31st and
yeah.
Harvard.
Wow.
But I loved Tulsa. It was really a nice town. There was 2 places where young people gathered up, 2 drive-in restaurants out. One was 11th and Sheridan, and right across the street there was another one. And the people my age, my group of people, they would gather in 1 or 2 of those places. And it was, I forget the exact name of what they were, but you drove your car in there and you flipped your lights, and that signaled a waitress to come to your car. And they came and got your order. And when they brought it out on trays that hooked on the window. And then when you wanted them to come and pick your tray up, you flipped your lights again. So that was real neat.
Did you ever go to the drive-in theater out in North Tulsa, around that area?
Didn't go to North Tulsa much, except up on Reservoir Hill in North Tulsa. Just drive up there to see the lights, city lights. But I didn't spend much time in North Tulsa. It was a rough area.
It's a little bit rough now, yeah.
Yeah. But downtown there was 4 really nice movie theaters. The one I worked in was on, I believe, 7th and Main, and it was a small theater. But downtown, 4th and Main and 4th and Boston, there was 4 really nice theaters. There was the Orpheum and the Rialto and 2 more. Sometimes I can remember all 4 of them, but I can't right now. You've caught me on the spot.
No worries.
I can't think of those 2. But anyway, that was our entertainment. Usually on the weekend, we'd go to one of those movie theaters. They were really nice.
Was that the era that you met Grandpa?
No. After I finished business school, I came back home, and I I didn't have a break between high school and business school, so I was kind of worn out. And I came back home to rest for a couple of weeks and figure out where I'm going to go to get a job and start to work. So while I was at Mom and Dad's house for that first couple of weeks, the Stillwell, the welfare office, it was called then. It's called something different now. But they asked me to come down and take a job there as secretary. And so I thought about it for a while, and I thought, well, I need to be home for a little while with Mom and Dad, so I did take that job at Stillwell. And during that time, I was in downtown Stillwell with the girl I worked with, and she had graduated with Jack, and we met him on the street in Stillwell, and she introduced me to him. So that was my very first time to meet him, but it didn't register with me. I was like, hi, Jack, bye. And he didn't make much of an impression on me at that time. He did later. So that's when I first met him. And then, during that time, Shirley and Jerry were involved, and they were getting married, and Imodine, my best friend, was getting ready to get married. I was kind of left on my own, and I
know that feeling.
Yeah, I was running around with some boys from Peavine that I thought, Virginia, you are so much better than this. Get out of here and get somewhere where there's some more people to meet. So I told my dad I was going to resign my job and go back to Tulsa. I had been working at Stillwell about a year and a half. And he said, he was really disappointed. He said, you've got one of the best jobs in Stillwell for a young woman, and you want to just give it up and go. You don't even know what you can do in Tulsa. I said, yeah, that's right, I'm going. And there's another story. I had another reason for leaving, because this guy that I couldn't get rid of, he was in the Army, but he was getting ready to come back to the United States. And I knew if I lived at Baron, he would be on my doorstep every night.
Yeah.
I had to leave to get away from him. And I told my parents, don't tell him where I am. I'm going to leave here so he can't find me.
Was he threatening or just annoying?
No, he was just annoying. He was a nice guy, but he was too serious, and I knew I didn't want to be serious with him. And so I told Frank and Gwen that were married. They were living in California, and he was in the Navy. He was getting ready to be shipped back to Japan. And I told them that I was going to leave my job at Stillwell and go back to Tulsa. And Gwenda said, if you'll wait till I get there, I'll go with you, because I've got to have something to do while Frank's gone. So I waited on her a couple of months, and then I went. And first couple of days I had a job, and it was with it was McDonnell Douglas, and it was a government deal.
That's the airplane company?
Yeah. So they told me I was hired, but they had to do a FBI check on me first, on my background, to make sure I wasn't a terrorist or something, because it was government work. And all this time I'm praying, oh God, let them find something. I don't want to work for them. And I had taken a typing test and probably broke all the records. So anyway, they hired me. They didn't find anything bad wrong with my background. They hired me. But it was really hard to get to work, because you know where that plant is? It's way out on Mingo, I believe, North Mingo. Do you know where there's a traffic circle out on the east side of Tulsa?
No. Wait, yes, vaguely I do. I think it's on Admiral, and it's near like the, okay, yeah.
It's Admiral and something. And you turn north on there and go about a mile, and that's the big.
Okay, I think
that
there's
was the big plant.
A Goodwill or Salvation Army plant over there somewhere, sorting center.
Okay, it was difficult to get to.
Yeah.
And Gwenda and I had an apartment pretty close to in town. And I had to catch a city bus early in the morning because I had to clock in at 7:12 out at that plant. So I had to
On the dot?
Yeah.
What a strange time to clock in.
I had to get a city bus to take me downtown, and then there I had to catch another bus lines called the Dawson lines that traveled out to that plant. So that's how I got to work. Took me about an hour to get there. And after I'd been there a day or two, I found out you could get rides out there with individuals. There was a bulletin board, and they posted who was hauling riders out and where they lived and all that. So I found a group of people that were close to me, and they were driving out there. So you paid them $2 or $3 a week or $5 a week or something, and they came and picked you up at your house, and you all drove out there because you all worked there.
Yeah.
So that worked out well. So, and the pay was good. It was much more than I had made at Stillwell. So I was glad to tell my dad, you know, I have a job and it pays well, and it paid more than the job I had at Stillwell. So he was proud that I had that. Okay, what else?
Well, when did you, how old were you at that point when you were working at McDonnell Douglas?
Let me think a minute. I had worked at Stillwell a year and a half, so I was 19. I was probably 20.
And I want to get up to, at this first interview we do, I want to get up to the point where you get married. So what
Okay.
age are you when you got married?
I was 21.
So let's do one more year.
Okay. Let me think now. I'm old. You know, I'm 81 years old, so
Yeah.
I gotta take a minute to think. Jerry, Shirley's boyfriend then, had been drafted into the Army, and he was stationed at Fort Chaffee, at Fort Smith. And he was home on a weekend that I was home from Tulsa. And he said, Virginia, I went into the Army with this guy from Piney named Jack Adair. I want you to meet him. I said, I've already met him. And I had a boyfriend in Tulsa at the time. And I wasn't too interested.
Yeah.
But anyway, on Sunday, I had to go back to Tulsa Sunday afternoon, but earlier in the afternoon, Jerry came over and said, Virginia and Shirley, let's go for a ride. We said, okay. So I got in the car with them, and he drove up here to Jack's house. Came up that road that comes up the creek.
And for the listeners, we're staring at that house right across the street out the window of this house. It's still over there.
Yeah. So Jerry drives up in the yard, and Lois comes out the door. They're eating lunch, and we're out running around at lunchtime. And so Jerry told her who we were, and she asked us to come in and eat. And he said, no, we just came up here to see Jack for a minute. So Jack comes out to the car, and he gets in the back seat with me, and so we talk a little bit, and you know, that's all that happened that day. So I go back to Tulsa. He goes back to his Army camp, and about a month later, I got a letter from someone named John Adair.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, who is John Adair? And I opened it up, and he had written me a letter and signed it Jack. So I knew. I didn't know his name was John, but anyway. He was nice, you know, and so I was home one weekend, and he was here also, and we had a date. So we went out, and after that I liked him, and I saw how other people liked him. We drove down the main street of Stillwell, and every car we met, he's stopping and talking. He knows everybody, and everybody's laughing their heads off at things he says. And I'm thinking, well, there's more to this guy than what I thought. So I liked him after that. And so then, let's see, he came to Tulsa one weekend to see me, and I was going to cook dinner for him that night. And I had an apartment with another girl. Gwenda had long since left because Frank had come back. So I had another girlfriend that I had an apartment with. And she had come back to Stillwell for the weekend, so I'm by myself. And I said, I'll cook dinner for you if you'll come on out here. So he got a cab from the hotel in Tulsa where he was staying and came out. But we had an electrical storm and the electricity went out. So instead of cooking, I just heated up some weenies and put some barbecue sauce in them. That's what we ate. And but I still liked him, you know, and I guess he liked me. He was staying at I think it was called the Tulsa Hotel at that time, right downtown. So anyway, we had a nice visit that time, and
I need
then,
to interrupt your story for just a minute. I'm sorry, but I have to know the answer. When you guys drove up here to Matt's and Lois's, did you know this was the guy you met on the street, and did he know this was the girl?
yeah.
You knew it already, or
Yeah.
you knew it when you saw each other?
I knew when Jerry drove up there, I knew somehow.
Oh.
I knew.
Uh-huh.
And I guess Jack remembered me too. I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, Eric.
Oh, no, you're good. I've got 2 questions left then about that. How long did you and Grandpa date?
We, our dating was long distance because he was in the Army and I was in Tulsa. So it was about 2 years. Pretty close to 2 years.
Do you remember the story of him proposing to you?
I don't think he actually formally proposed. I think we just both somehow understood that
that was the way it was supposed to be?
Yeah. I don't think he didn't get down on his knees or he didn't go ask my dad or anything like that. So I guess we just started talking about when we get married, when he gets out of the Army.
Yeah.
But he sent me an engagement ring through the mail. And, oh gosh, I can't tell you that. Somebody was over to see me when I got the engagement ring.
Fess up, Verge. We gotta hear this.
And I said, well, you're going to have to go.
Because I'm engaged now.
I've got the engagement ring.
It's official.
Wow. All right, well, that's good enough for episode 1. Thank you, Grandma.